Battle of Waterloo
by
Angie Park,
Kit Sconey,
Lorraine Stokes, and Max Miller. The Battle of Waterloo was a crucial battle between Napoleon's French army against an Anglo-Allied army combined with a Prussian army. This battle ended the Napoleonic Wars, a series of battles fought by the First French Empire against an array of European coalitions. On the 18th of June, 1815, at the very end of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Waterloo marked the end of many long years of fighting. We chose this prompt because this battle still affects how Europe, specifically the United Nations, America, and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization work currently. The Battle of Waterloo brought cooperation among states in the United Nations to help bring stability and unity in Europe, ended the French attempts to dominate the continent since the battle, with the exception of the Crimean War. Napoleon was a famous French general with many great military achievements in France. After he graduated from a prestigious military school called Anton, he was commissioned to the second lieutenant in artillery and became an officer all in the year 1785. Napoleon was a leader of the French Republic as first consul from 1799 to 1804. When he ascended the throne as Emperor of the French Empire, he also grew the French military to make an effort in conquering Europe. In 1814, Napoleon was defeated by the Allied forces in Europe after fighting for many years and exiled to the island of Elba. Alas, their efforts were proved futile because in March of 1815, he fled from Elba and returned to France. Calling this the 100 Days Empire, Napoleon attempted to rally his armies across Europe and re-established his power. The Battle of Waterloo is one of Napoleon's major attempts to regain European power and was a decisive battle in which his army clashed with the Anglo-Allied force against him. The Battle of Waterloo took place on June 18, 1815, in a field near Waterloo, Belgium. The first shots were fired at 11:20 a.m., kicking off one of the most famous and influential battles in French history. The battle was between Napoleon's French military force, around 20,000 soldiers, and the Anglo-Allied army that consisted of 26,000 British soldiers, mostly veterans, 31,000 German soldiers, including 5,100 of King German's League, experienced and highly trained, 12,000 Hanoverians, some of whom were only receiving basic training, 5,450 Brunswickers who were young and inexperienced but were chosen to fight because of their skill at Quartier Basse. The coalition of 30,000 soldiers was led with the Duke of Wellington, Marshal Blucher. Leading this coalition, the British and Prussian troops were specifically led by the Duke of Wellington. Napoleon attacked the center of the Allied forces, but ultimately failed due to the intense resistance of the Allied coalition led by Wellington. Additionally, the Prussians' attack began, leaving Napoleon's army to be surrounded and eventually defeated. The consequences of this result caused the fall of Napoleon's French Empire and the end of mass French rule in Europe.
In the Battle of Waterloo, the Duke of Wellington and Marshal Blucher did employ a defensive strategy, initially waiting for the opposing forces of the French to close the distance, effectively fire, then charge in with bayonets while the French were still recovering from the volley. The French, planned by Napoleon, were planning to assault their opposing force through exhaustion in the early segment of the battle. Napoleon led the men from large bodies, so there would be a constant great force against their opponent. The French forces fought hard, but as the day progressed, various factors, including the harsh winter weather, changing the battlefield, and soldiers' conditions, led to a series of exhaustion. Wet weather caused a fatal delay on Napoleon's troops as heavy snow fell upon the region around Waterloo on the night before the battle and months before. Napoleon's men were exhausted from the harsh weather, little resources from the Russians the scorched earth policy, burning all the crops, killing animals, and getting rid of other resources so the French could not use it to their advantages. The limited resources and harsh weather conditions ultimately led to the soldiers' exhaustion and defeat on the Waterloo battlefield. Napoleon's battle against the Duke of Wellington and Marshal Blucher ultimately resulted in Napoleon abdicating from the throne. Once he had abdicated the throne, Napoleon was sent to St. Helena as a form of exile. He was sent with 28 people to accompany him and died of what historians suppose was a form of stomach cancer after about 6 years on the island. Bourbon monarchy was restored in France as the brothers, former king of Louis XVI, Louis XVIII, took over the throne successfully, running a conservative government aiming to restore the properties of ancien regime. The Bourbon Restoration period was an era of internal and external peace in France, including economic stability and temporary lack of violence.
The Battle of Waterloo, one of the most decisive battles in French history, was fought on the 18th of June 1815. It was the most decisive battle of the Napoleonic War since it clearly marked the conclusion of a 23-year-long fight. The battle not only took Napoleon out of power, but also resulted in the end of the French attempt to take over Europe. The victory of the Duke of Wellington's coalition destroyed Napoleon's imperial rule of the continent. In the end, he was forced to hand over his empire to the coalition and go into exile for the second and final time. The total number of soldiers killed or wounded reached nearly 50,000 by the end of the battle. Close to 25,000 of these casualties were on the French side, and approximately 23,000 of them were the Allied army soldiers. The Battle of Waterloo marked the conclusion of the Napoleonic era, ushering in a period of political stability across Europe. It also ended France's attempt to dominate the continent under Napoleon. Afterwards, the Vienna Congress